Hello all, and welcome to the Paul Chandler Show. I'm your host, Paul Chandler. Today we're going to be talking about hypertension. Now, no matter if you're a coder or work on the clinical side, sometimes you may feel that your blood pressure may go up at work, have elevated blood pressure going on. That's hypertension. And we're going to be looking at the documentation requirements because that is one condition, though, with hypertension, how it also links with the cardiovascular system for heart failure and the urinary system with chronic kidney disease. So we'll be looking at hypertension itself today, and then also linking it with the heart failure and chronic kidney disease options. When we're coding hypertension, there's no grid I'm going to be doing this time, so you do get a break on those. But we have the categories of I-10 through I-16. And one issue, though, I have with the hypertension codes is that when we're using the use additional code rules, how the order is not, I think, how it should be. They're out of order a little bit. So looking at the documentation, the requirements for coding for hypertension, we have, again, I-10 through I-16. So I-10 is just hypertension, and that's it. Nothing else is required. And I'm just going to use the acronym HTN. Now, one thing, though, that we have as far as the documentation requirements are benign and malignant hypertension. That does not mean cancerous that we're dealing with. Like, for example, benign and malignant neoplasms, those are cancer cells. When I'm talking about, though, benign and malignant hypertension, as far as those documentations, it's a severity level. Think of it as benign hypertension, minor, and malignant hypertension, more like moderate severe in there. But it doesn't matter if we have those words or not, all those combined are dealing with I-10, and that's it. Now, when we start getting, though, through the I-11s, I-12s, we're involving other organ systems. So after I-10 for hypertension, we have I-11, hypertension, heart disease. This is where we get the additional codes, requirements. So after we drop down from I-11, we have I-11.0 and I-11.9 as two different options. I-11.0, hypertension, heart disease with heart failure, and I-11.9 without heart failure. So now we have heart failure going on for the I-11.0, so we'll need additional documentation notes on the op report or the office visit note to say what type of heart failure the patient's having. That's when we'll use additional code in the I-50 range. Again, depending on what type of heart failure the patient has. So this is where if you like things being symmetrical or even balanced out, not so much in hypertension, because the hypertension with heart disease, only one of the code options, the with heart failure, requires an additional code. Without heart failure, patients not having heart failure, so why would you use additional code to say that they are having heart failure, I-50, if they're not? So that's why I-11.9, no additional code after that. Then we're dealing with, after I-11, we have I-12 for CKD, or chronic kidney disease. And here we have I-12.0 or I-12.9. Now, we're not talking about is the patient having kidney failure or not, like how it was for the heart. We're dealing with the stages of CKD, chronic kidney disease. And now we're in the N18 range. What is nice for this, though, is I-12.0 and I-12.9. Think of it as I-12.0, how it says in the documentation requirements, patient has stage 5 CKD or ESRD, end-stage renal disease. And taking a brief little moment there, remembering that the difference between stage 5 CKD and end-stage renal disease, basically the same things clinically. The only difference, though, is ESRD, or end-stage renal disease. That is a patient who is on, a CKD patient who is on chronic dialysis. So that's the key phrase in there. CKD patient, so if it says ESRD, we would code that as N18.6. Or if it says a stage 5 CKD patient, which would normally be N18.5, But if it says they're on chronic dialysis, we have to up the code to N18.6. But looking though as far as the descriptions, so I12.0, stage 5 CKD or ESRD, but we don't know which one yet. So think of that as, I don't know if you have kids yourselves, or maybe when you're a kid, or if nieces and nephews and whatnot, or grandkids. If you ever heard the phrase, I got a secret, I ain't gonna tell ya, that's what we get with the I12.0. I got a secret, it's stage 5 or ESRD, I ain't gonna tell ya. So we need additional code to specify which one of it is. That's why we have the I12.0, and then we'll use the additional code in the N18 range, in this case either 0.5 for stage 5 CKD or 0.6 for ESRD, end-stage renal disease. But we do have more than just those two levels of CKD. So the patient's having hypertension with CKD, chronic kidney disease, and if it is not stage 5 nor ESRD, now we have to choose I12.9. So I12.9, hypertension, chronic kidney disease, stage 1 through 4, or unspecified. We just don't know. I got a secret, I ain't gonna tell you. Same frickin' thing again. We have CKD, we have hypertension, we know it's stage 1 through 4, or maybe just crappy documentation, we don't know, but we still need an additional code to specify what stage of CKD the patient has. So that brings us back to another N18 code. N18.1 through 0.4 for stages 1 through 4, or N18.9 for unspecified stage of CKD. Now, this is where speaking of actually acronyms, HTN, CKD, this is where my OCD comes in, and this really annoys me, is notice though how counting, so just generically counting, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so forth. I12.0, stage 5 or ESRD. I12.9, stage 1, 2, 3, 4, or unspecified. They're in reverse. I really would love it, but it is not this way. Why don't they have stage 1 through 4 first, and then 5 in ESRD? If you ask that yourself, just remember, I did not write this book. So, CKD, both those have additional codes because both of them need to know what stage of CKD the patient's having. If the patient has hypertension, CKD. So just to recap before we go to I13, I have to erase the board in a moment. We have I10, hypertension, just HTN, and that's it. Patient has hypertension heart disease. Then if it's heart failure, yes, we need to have additional code for what type of heart failure the patient's having. And that'll be in the I50 category range. Or no heart failure, just the one code, I11.9. Patient has hypertension and CKD. We have 0.0 and 0.9, but I got a secret, I ain't gonna tell ya. We always need additional code to specify what stage of CKD the patient has. Now, this is where it gets more confusing. So think of, we have I11 and I12, but I13. A nice, simple way to say it is I11 plus I12 equals I13. And that's not some weird, I honestly don't know if that's like trig or pre-cal or some like higher than algebra math problem where you're having letters and numbers together. But I13 is a combination of I11 and I12. So I13 is hypertension, heart disease with CKD. So they have both conditions. Yes, they're probably having a bad day, but the coding, it's really, it's unique. I'll leave it at that. So with I13s, we have, going down, we have I13.0, I13.1, we have the 5TH in a red circle. So that tells us, or a square, depending on your book publisher, saying we need 5 characters. So I13.1 is not a valid character. So I have I13.10 or I13.11. And then I13.2, that is a valid code. No additional codes required. And where this gets a little bit funky is those additional code rules. So notice we have, as far as the requirements, 3 characters is the category, hypertension heart is CKD. Then we go from 4 to 5 to 5 to 4. So with additional codes, I13.0 is hypertension with heart failure and CKD. So we'll need that additional code for the heart failure and the additional code for the CKD. I13.10 and 0.11, both of those are without heart failure. So no I50 code because no heart failure going on. But we still always need to have the additional code for the CKD. Then we go back to having heart failure and I13.2. We have heart failure going on and we have CKD going on. So with all these additional code rules, what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight in blue the I50s, how we need it on the first and the last. Then I'll highlight in brown the CKD under the N18s. So if you kind of look at it, and speaking of hypertension, this kind of looks like a heart failure sandwich, if you will, where the top bun and the bottom bun includes heart failure and CKD, while the middle is just the CKD stage in there. So that's sometimes where I get a little bit kind of confusing, if you will, with all the different kind of skipping back and forth. But remember the two we just looked at, the I12s was stage 5 or ESRD and then 1 through 4. Looking at I13, it goes 1 through 4 and then 5 or ESRD. So that goes in numerical order. So you can tell essentially whoever wrote the I12 category did not write the I13 category. Then just a few more categories that we have for hypertension. We do have skipping I14, save it for later. We do have I15 for the hypertension that is secondary hypertension, and that is due to underlying condition. So patient has another condition, causes them to have hypertension, that's where this category would come in. Then we have I16, hypertension in crisis. And somebody just looking at the documentation, is it urgent or emergent in there? So while true, I10 through I13 are the more common characters that we have for the categories, again, I14, save it for later, we still have I15 and I16. Either I15, secondary hypertension, another condition causes patient to have hypertension, or I16, it's a crisis situation. And so we're just looking at the guidelines and seeing what's the requirement for those. I do thank you for this attending this educational moment on hypertension. Hopefully you don't have hypertension now from a hypertension sandwich. Have an awesome rest of the day, and I'll see you all next time. If you like this video and want to see more, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's so easy. It's right there. A little button. Just push it. Subscribe. I got all night. Nothing else to do. Just subscribe.